It's a lot easier to lose money you've never had than losing money you had. In fact, I worked the first 2 years, first 18 months, I had zero salary. And then we were the lowest paid employees in the company at a whopping $1,200 a month, and we thought we were rich. And in my mind, I said, I have two options. I could sit here and just be depressed, or I could say, all right, look at this incredible experience you just got. Sky's the limit for you, Eric. You could just do whatever you want. Like, you could still go get hired anywhere. You could take all this knowledge and go build the next thing. In that time, I was always like the number 2 guy or the number 3 guy, the right arm to the initial founder. And even though I'd built it up for 7 years, there was always such a mass discrepancy between his ownership and mine. So as we were looking at the next thing, it was almost like, well, we've worked together so long. What is the next project we're going to do together? But as we started coming up with ideas, it was almost like the big mental thing for me. And I remember you always think of the choose your own adventure, like you're going to go this path or this path in life. And it was like, this was like my mentor, the person I worked my first real business together. It was time for me to split ties with him as well, because I realized at one point that I was always going to be looked at as the other guy that he's bringing into his idea, and never really treating me as a fair, in my opinion, what would be a fair partner, like in the amount of work and effort I did.
Welcome to Builders, the podcast for impact-driven leaders who are done carrying it all and ready to scale with clarity, strategy, and freedom. I'm your host, Alex Snider, strategic growth architect, creator of the CEO Recode, and second brain to leaders who are building brilliant companies without sacrificing every ounce of their time, energy, or sanity. Each episode, I sit down with bold leaders who've rebuilt, recalibrated, or redefined what it means to lead well and live well on their own terms. We talk messy pivots, leadership upgrades, tactical wins, and the deep personal work it takes to build a business that actually works for you. If you love the episode, make sure you follow, rate, and share it with another leader who's building big and wants to build smarter. And if you're listening and thinking, damn, I need someone in the guts of my business with me, let's talk. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth, and define 2 to 3 high-impact shifts you can implement now to regain traction and build momentum. Now, let's dive in. Let's build it better. Eric, welcome to Builders. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I cannot wait to jump into our conversation. You are somebody who really builds empires for yourself and for other experts. And you are also an incredible community builder, which I am such an advocate for. So I can't wait to dive in. As always, I don't even try to do justice to you. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in your own words. Who are you and what are you building?
Thank you. Wow. So I am, looking back on life, serial entrepreneur, and I've always been a community builder. I didn't realize it. And now I'm actually building community in a big way. So we'll get into that. And I'm excited to sort of reflect on life and say, what am I really good at? And yeah, that was an area that I happened to be really involved with throughout my life. I'm out in San Diego, born in Southern California, went out to school in UC San Diego, and I've stayed in San Diego ever since, and never jumped into the corporate world despite graduating with a pretty solid GPA at a really prestigious school. And I caught the bug of something inside of me said, don't go into those people that are recruiting you, just wait, and which is not like me. I'm usually just a quick start, let's go. But in this case, I didn't. I got back from a backpacking Europe trip that you sort of the thing to do after you graduate college, and all next thing you know, it was like first person that says, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We're building this thing to do this, to do that, and the other thing." I'm like, "Sounds cool. Where do I start?" And they're like, "Well, we don't actually have any money to pay. We're a startup." I'm like, "But we're going to change the world." Kind of those things. And I'm 21 and naive. I'm like, "Great, let's go. What's my job? Like, let's get started." So that was that's what excited me, was building something, never going to the world and just saying, all right, let's do, and not looking back now, it's easy to understand that I was always meant to be kind of the entrepreneur versus the employee corporate route. Didn't know that at the time, but you reflect and you realize and you look back at the choices you made. I'm like, well, there you go. That makes sense now.
I love that. So tell us a little bit around, was it just that gut check moment where you didn't, answer the recruiter's call? Or how did you know that you were meant to build businesses? What were the signposts along the way?
Yeah, I think it was based on what really got me excited. And I think, ultimately just, I guess I felt a sense of, well, I could always get recruited with this degree and do those things. But, and, I had jobs all through school, but it just didn't excite me as much as, sitting down with somebody else who was a huge visionary and created this vision of what we were going to do. And all of a sudden that seemed really exciting. Like, let's go build something. Let's go do something big. And I think when you looked at that, and that's where my attention went towards, I think that's what, got me fired up. And I think everything I do, it's now, what's the purpose? What are we building towards just versus just doing a job?
Yeah. Building something from nothing, I think, is a really unique opportunity and experience. And I always say, you need to have this level of audacity to believe that something it can exist, can be created basically from nothing, which is what entrepreneurship, at its core is.
It is. And I always find, and I always reflect now that I'm a little wiser than I was many years ago. And I look back and say, like, when I see a challenge or a problem. I mean, they say this all the time, and it seems so obvious. Yeah, if there's a problem, just go solve it. There's a business opportunity there. But I truly like, had those entrepreneurial ideas. I mean, you and I were literally just riffing in the green room, and we came up with an idea. I'm like, God, that's a problem that's nobody's solving. There's a business right there. Like, I'm like already ready to get going on that. So it's like rather than getting frustrated, like a lot of people do, sit around and complain, like, why this doesn't work. I usually would just light up and say, this is great. This doesn't work. That means there's an opportunity here. And I think I just had that all the time.
I love that. And yeah, I loved what we were riffing on a little while ago. I bought a domain name while I was on a pre with one of our other guests because it was just like we were riffing. We were like, this opportunity. I was like, let me just see if it's available. And I was like, bought the domain name. Had by the end of the day, it had like 3 WhatsApp, voice notes with people, bunch of resources coming in. So I think that is a unique character trait, really solution lens rather than the problem lens. You need to know that the problem exists and you don't want to be building something just because you think it's cool. It's lovely, but that's a passion project, not probably a scalable business. But yeah, I think that's a unique trait. So what was that first venture at 21? How did it go?
Yeah. So first venture, this gentleman, Michael's name was, approached me and said, "Hey, the college market is the most coveted market, and all the advertisers are trying to go after them, and we're going to build the ability to using tech to connect all college students to a platform." And so I hate to date myself, but let's just say this is in the late 1990s, before the internet was actually here. And we essentially, to make a long story short, created what ultimately was a mega voice messaging platform. So the browser was over the phone, if you will, where you'd hit like one to add yourself to your fraternity, two to add yourself to sorority, and then you can send group messages to entire groups, or for the sports teams or whatever. So it's a way to communicate and interact, and then that kept getting built, and then all of a sudden the internet did hit in 98, 97, 98, and then we turned over to the internet, and we went from about 3, 4 employees, kept raising money, almost ran out of money many times, just about missed payroll many times, had to figure out ways to, I mean, we actually missed payroll a couple times, and then had fun conversations with the employees. Just crazy. And 10 employees grew to about 100. I'm sorry, grew to 400 employees after 4 acquisitions. We raised over $100 million. And what we had built was essentially the first Facebook. That was the first social media platform. Went initially just from all voice into computer and voice, and we grew that to give you context, we were the #1 website for the college age demographic back in 2000, right before we went filed to go public, and we were the 40th biggest traffic site on the internet, the entire internet back in the day. And so it was a wild ride just from an idea, and we just kept pivoting and pivoting. When tech changed, we had to change along with it. And in my 20s, I got my street smart MBA, if you will, having done all the things I did, and to keep things sort of on a high level. Thought we were going to be good and retired, and we were supposed to go IPO at about $500 million, and that was set me up for life. And then the market crashed 2 months, the first big market crash. For those of you that study early internet marketing crashes back in the day, again, me being in my early 50s, this was something that happened, one of the first big crash, and the money we had lined up, it was called a bridge loan to take you to the IPO. The people loaning the money, we were about 2 days from getting that money, and they paused it based on the crash that happened that week, the Friday before, or the Thursday before. And so we were left without money to get us to the IPO while all the markets just sort of froze back in the first internet crash, if you will. So we went from, wow, 7 days a week of working. That's all I knew in my 20s, is sleeping on mattresses in the company, to like, yeah, having no life other than the bubble I lived in. And there you have it. But I had an amazing experience from that.
Wow. I often say things like that are big headlines. What do people not see when they hear that headline?
Make sure, I want to make sure I understand the question. So,
Yeah, I mean, you outlined it a little bit, right? Like you guys were grinding, right? You missed payrolls, you had no life. But in that transition of, okay, we're about to exit, and then everything crashes. What is happening kind of behind the scenes? Like, how do you come to terms with that? How do you decide what's next? We, don't hear a lot about it a lot unless you're in the right kind of spaces. But I know recently I was at Mexico Tech Week. There was a panel with a founder who actually wrote a book about what it was like post exit. So that was like a happy version, and there was depression, and there was all of these things. I would imagine similarly, there's a big lost sense of self. How do you kind of
yeah,
navigate?
no, okay, I get it. So it was, looking back, it was definitely a state of shock initially. I mean, you sort of in your mind felt like, okay, this is it. I mean, I'm finally going to reap what I've sowed after 7 years, and there's the excitement, enthusiasm of that. What sort of got me through all that was just, I don't know, like I didn't really go through it very much because I didn't stay in that tough space. We were aggressively trying to save the company and do this and do that. And next thing you know, the company had to go through a bankruptcy to get out of the mess. And we were about to buy it a bankruptcy. And then our person that was going to fund it all of a sudden had a stroke. And it was like, all right, every possible way that we thought we were going to get is out. So it was like a true sign that, okay, we're meant to turn the page and do something else. And I think for me, it was really resiliency of being 28 at the time, and I always like to go back and say it's a lot easier to lose money you've never had than losing money you had. Meaning, I lived off of ramen for the first years. I never had all this money, so it was just like, in fact, I worked the first 2 years, first 18 months, I had zero salary, and then we were the lowest paid employees in the company at a whopping $1,200 a month, and we thought we were rich. So it was just working our way up, but it was paper money. And in my mind, I said, I have two options. I could sit here and just be depressed, or I could say, all right, look at this incredible experience you just got. Sky's the limit for you, Eric. You could just do whatever you want. Like you could still go get hired anywhere. You could take all this knowledge and go build the next thing. Um, you have the skills now. You have the confidence to go do that. I can't. That's not going to be pulled away from me. It was just this thing I had a paper. So what was my choice there? Like, I mean, so that was just, I took that path and said, all right, let's just go on and go do the next thing.
I love that focus on like the skills and the experience, because I think sometimes we underrate how much you learn, how much you have to leverage after every experience, regardless of what the quote unquote end result was. If you went through something and learned and you created components of success, you now have all of that. And literally, people cannot take that away from you, obviously, barring strokes or other things that would alter your mental capacities. So, what did you do next?
So from that, I remember one of the biggest conversations, just to share, is that, in that time, I was always like the number two guy or the number three guy, the right arm to the initial founder. And even though I'd built it up for 7 years, there was always such a mass discrepancy between his ownership and mine. And I understood, I had to learn why. Like, okay, he put in the money and the value of the funding initially, and this, that, and the other thing. But I still had so much sweat equity in this deal. I wouldn't say there was necessarily like it was justified, but I think part of me felt like, there's a lot of work to only have this percentage versus somebody else. When the actual trenches, there was a lot, it was a lot of equality in the trenches. So as we were looking at the next thing, it was almost like, well, we've worked together so long. What is the next project we're going to do together? But as we started coming up with ideas, it was almost like like the big mental thing for me. And I remember you always think of the choose your own adventure, like, this path or this path in life. And it was like, this was like my mentor, the person I worked my first real business together. It was time for me to split ties with him as well, because I realized at one point that I was always going to be looked at as the other guy that he's bringing into his idea, and never really treating me as a fair, in my opinion, what would be a fair partner, like in the amount of work and effort I did. So it was at that point I said, you know what, I can do this on my own. I don't need that crutch. And then went off. And so back to the story you and I talked about, it was like, well, what was the problem I wanted to solve next? Like, what happened to be my life at that time? And just a funny story. Two things actually happened. Two projects I'd say that sort of. Well, first, I was a huge fan of self-development when I was 21. We all used to lock ourselves in the room when we were building this company. And at 6 a.m., we'd all listen to either Brian Tracy or Tony Robbins. And if you were late by a minute, you'd have to bring breakfast. I mean, that's kind of how dedicated we are to personal growth in our 20s. And I love that, because that's the stuff they never taught you in school. All the communication and techniques and just, building, just the life skills you don't get in college, which is a whole other conversation that, when I make it really big, my give back is going to be in the educational sector to help teach these things earlier age. But that being said, so Brian Tracy happened to be, it was a family friend who worked with Brian, and he was in the same town in San Diego. And Brian needed help with his website in 2001. He's like, I'm getting stuck with this internet thing. And like, well, Brian, I'm a fan of yours, and I can come, and I know what you need. I can help you. So I met him, and I'm like, walking to his office that day, half drooling in my mouth, because, oh my God, this is the guy that was like my mentor that I never met before, because I listened to him on tape. And I said, Brian, I know what you need to do. I'll build you this thing, but I got to be honest with you. I'm not an employee. I'll come in and build this to you, but don't pay me until I make you money. And so I had that attitude, which is another lesson I learned earlier on from my first business that I share, is that if you have the ability to exchange sweat equity for an opportunity, then do it. If you have the ability to do that, it gets you in the door. Anytime you're able to walk up to somebody and say, hey, you're not going to pay me until I prove myself, you're going to throw, that shows a lot for somebody on the receiving end of that. And I still, even today, I rarely get anybody that walks up with that to me on that opportunity. Somebody says it to me, great, let's see what happens. I know there's time and energy they have to invest into you. So you got to be at least, somewhat have that ability. Anyway, so Brian said, Eric, you're my kind of guy. Let's get started. So that was a conversation I had 25 plus years ago. And here I am today, still working with Brian Tracy, which led to ultimately me backing into an agency of helping gurus like Brian Tracy, Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup for the Soul, and many others that along the way that we worked with, and helping gurus build their business, using online and other types of tools and all the things and systems that I learned along the way. The other thing I started, just as a fun side note, is I was a traveler, and this is going to give you the example of solving a problem. I was a traveler who I went to Club Med a few times. For those that may not remember the Club Med world, Club Med it was one of the initial all-inclusive resorts, and they had a lot of adults and fun villages. And what I remember when I'd go there is you'd meet great people. Let's say I'd meet somebody like you, Alex, who was like, living in some other city somewhere. You'd spend a week. They're really good at curating relationships and getting strangers to become friends. Well, what happened is when that week would end is all of a sudden be like, hey, nice to know you, see you later. And we would never like there was no interaction. And I came from this world of social media as I was beginning, and community, as I talked about. I was threading community in my entire world as I look back in life. And I said to myself, there's no community out here. So Club Med did all this work for a week to connect. Let's say you and I met each other there, but then we both leave. Well, why not create this community within Club Med threaded, where now you and I can maintain a contact, a relationship throughout? And so I built this whole concept called My Club Med, pitched it to them out in Miami and Paris. And next thing you know, I'm now a contractor with Club Med, getting to travel around and do stuff with Club Med and building them communities. So, A, entrepreneur, B, community builder, back even in the Club Med days of me in my late 20s after that. So I was doing Brian Tracy, I was consulting with Club Med, and I was doing a couple other projects. That's a long answer to your question.
I love that. And I love, that, I think that approach, I just want to call it out for anyone who's listening, whether you've, got an established business and you're looking at, a new angle, a new opportunity, a new partnership, or you're really early days and you're looking at like how to get your venture off the ground or build, your network. I think what you highlighted, Eric, is so valuable, which is anyone that you're probably trying to talk to has a lineup out their door, right? Of people who want something from them. And you hear this, right? You hear Alex Hormozi talks about this, so many other people. How can you provide value, and how can you show that you're confident in that, and value first before you ask? I think that is a really fundamental, and well as your ability to see solutions. And we were talking about this a little bit in our preamble, right? Like seeing the world as an opportunity to develop solutions rather than a frustrating world of problems is a lens that will change your life. And I think it is really one of the fundamental tests of whether you are entrepreneurial, like at your core.
That's right. You nailed it.
Love that. So I'm curious, there's so many more things that you've done, and I want to come back to that. But when you were talking about Brian Tracy, that is a venture that's very focused on training and development, correct? So how did working with him so early on, and probably the 6 a.m., Tony Robbins and his tapes as well, how did that kind of play into your leadership journey and your evolution of how you showed up? Because you have continued to build so many great teams and businesses that really does require you to develop leadership, which I don't think any of us are innately born with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to, we're constantly growing and evolving. And if we don't put energy into doing such things and expanding what we know, otherwise we're just limited by what our social environment, by our family, our parents, our surroundings in school. So there's so much we don't know. And I think getting excited to, get that content, get that learning. And I know you and I are surrounded by so many people who just love learning and growing, but there's incredible how many people aren't doing that. And I think ultimately they're just missing out on that opportunity. So back to what you said, I think just having been immersed by every day, listening to leadership skills and building skills and communication and sales skills and financial skills, it's just, I just got immersed into that. And then, but what's cool is not only you're learning it, but then immediately being able to apply it. Because there's one thing in us just sitting around and listening to, watching our YouTube shorts or channels and then just going back to our day. But having the ability to do both at the same time, I think really makes that difference. We learn a skill and then I remember while it was also fun to do in a group environment too within a company, and I'd always recommend doing this within companies, is that you can almost do these exercises together. So it's like you were learning something and then we would pause and we'd actually do the action exercise within the lesson within our own teams as it applied to our business. And having that application made a huge difference.
I love that distinction, because learning is amazing, but it can also be just a circuitous kind of trap where you just learn forever and don't apply, whether that's in leadership and team or business building or personal development. Like you can accumulate a lot of knowledge, but if you don't intentionally apply it, it doesn't likely benefit your life or your business.
A lot harder. Yep.
Are there any moments or pivotal moments or pivotal outcomes where you really saw how we learned this thing and then we did this thing and then this actually got better, or we avoided just something really tangible that stands out for you, whether it's from those early days or much later on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of threads. I mean, it's so hard to pick one because I think part of all the learning just became who I am as I learn and grow. But I think a couple things that I go back to quite a bit is the concept of active listening, just the general communication skills of that. I think is so foundational in everything we do, no matter what job you're in, whether that's just anything, sales, personal relationships. Whatever it is, things like that is just critical. Having the ability to really sit back and listen to somebody, let them talk first. People will like you ultimately. Get out of your own ego and way to sit there and want to spew out what you want to talk about, and try to engage the other person first. Those are just some basic fundamentals that sticks out to me as a couple of the ones. My favorite quote is from Brian Tracy that I remember that I listened to. Is called "I am responsible." I mean, I put that, on my desk and everything I live by. I believe that, so wholeheartedly. So just living through certain, fundamental tactics I learned through that. I could always say it. It's actually really freeing when you say that, I'm responsible no matter what happens around me, even for the reaction you and I talked about it, that crazy thing that happened on the crash of the internet. Well, ultimately, I'm responsible for the way I handle myself through a shitty situation. nobody else is. It's not going to be my friend Alex or anybody else that's going to come to my rescue. They may say, "Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry," and then they're on with their problems. It's up to me to decide how I want to handle that situation or anything that didn't go well. I mean, I use this business life, dating life, whatever it was. I'd reflect on anything that happened and say, well, what went wrong? What did I do? What could I have done better in that situation? And when you ask that question, it's actually really freeing up just to stop blaming and just saying, okay, I could have done this. I could have maybe have done it. Maybe I was too, excited, or maybe I didn't listen as much. What did I do?
I
That
love
kind
that.
of, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I'm biased. I have my own opinion. It happens to align, but I talk a lot about strategy and operations and structure. But I am just such a firm believer that leadership is really founded on self-awareness, emotional maturity, and that if you can't lead yourself and others through the strategy and the operational processes, then you just aren't going to reach the heights that are possible. So I love what you said. You gave some examples, but I'm wondering, if someone's listening and they're maybe a little earlier on, or they're in a situation where they want to go deeper on some of those, is there what's the baseline, okay, apply, this is the concept and you can apply it in the next 10 minutes or tomorrow. Is there something that really stands out for you as just the baby step that someone can take if they're either newer or in maybe a place where they're needing to recalibrate their leadership or their self-awareness?
Yeah, I mean, that one sentence, just that I am responsible, just saying that and think of all the situations you're walking through and just say that. And every time you reflect on, anytime you're frustrated, anytime you're angry with what somebody else did and you don't like the response, ask yourself what you could have done better in this situation. So I think just going through that a few times and getting the habit of that will help. Another example I can give you, I was just thinking about as you were talking there, is like even when you're working with clients or others and a result happened that maybe it wasn't even you, maybe it was a staff member. Okay. It's so funny because I'd always train my account managers. We'd always be trying to come up or, oh, I don't know if I should tell the client that, or maybe they won't find out or shoot. And I'm like, no, accept responsibility. In fact, the more you go ahead of it and tell the client, hey, I effed up, or we effed up, or Susie on the team effed up, and here's what we're going to do to fix it. It actually does a lot. It builds trust with the client that you're going to be straight with them. Number two is you're bringing them a solution, and you said and you're making them feel like I got the problem, I'm going to solve it. Here's the solution, I got you, and here's how we're doing to take care of it so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
Sorry, editors. I know it's raining. Andrina, are you able to let me finish this call? How about would you like a bribe? I don't know. What do you want to have lunch? How about Daddy will give you a special treat later if you okay, come in to get that. Okay, and then please close the door and I'll come play with you extra in a little bit, okay? Other door. Stuck now? So sorry.
you're good. You're good. You're muted.
Oops, I hit the mark clip button instead of my camera. Oh well, I don't know what the hell that
That's
meant,
right.
but I don't think it's
I've
good.
been trying. That's a new feature that I'm learning, so I'm trying to mark it so I can help her
Okay,
find the places to edit. So that's
that's
great. We
cool.
both marked it.
All right, keep going.
Perfect. So what we were talking about?
So Tom, I just gave you an example of the responsibility and the client
Yeah.
and all that.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So I really love that example because I think it shows that you are looking out for the client. You are doing what your job is, right? Which is to solve their problems. That also means finding their problems. That also means owning when there's a problem for you. And I know for me, one of my rules in consulting, I'm going to say a 1 strike tolerance. It was pretty much a 0 strike tolerance for if you're, someone on my team and a client asks and you do not know the answer. It was like, you need to say, I don't know. I will come back to you. Let me double check, or some iteration of that. If you ever threw out a panic number in a meeting with a client that was not based on fact, oof, the odds of you being in another client meeting anytime soon were close to 0 because it was just, one, people remember numbers. So now that's stuck in their head
Totally.
forever. Two, you just breached trust massively. And I think one, on my projects, absolutely not. Two, you need to learn that lesson early on. And if you don't have a leader that is drilling that in with some consequence, obviously, like, again, as a leader, it's not about like unloading on that person. It's about saying, hey, when you realize, it's like, hey, this is the reality of that. So we're going to solve this problem, which means go get the answer and go acknowledge to the client that you were wrong and that. But in the future, this is how that works. And this is kind of, when you're going to be allowed to practice that skill again.
Yep.
So I really, really like that example, because I think, to your point as well, and I see this in my clients all the time, that at work is the same thing at home, right? Like, I kind of joke about, whether you think you signed up for it or not, leadership entrepreneurship is a personal development course. And the thing that's going to really open up opportunities for you in business is dealing with your shit. And that is the same thing that's going to help you have a better marriage. That's the same thing that's going to help you resolve whatever issues you have with your parents. Like, it's the thing that's going to allow you to be more present. And anxiety is future worry and depression is past stuck. Like, all of that is what's going to make you a great leader, but it's going to make everything else in your life flow better, and for you to understand yourself and the world around you. So
Yeah, and I don't know what it is that makes people do that. I don't know if it's an insecurity. I mean, I also see people embellishing information. They're trying to get the deal. Oh, we're going to be able to do this, this. I mean, why? I mean, you're essentially setting yourself up for. You're right. Because clients will remember the numbers you give them, and they'll remember, cling on to one or two things. Oh, you said we're going to do this, and we're going to have this result. And it's just like, even if you said, well, we might get this if we do really well, they're going to cling on to what they think they heard. So you got to be so careful on embellishing, and just be confident in your own abilities. And that's what you need. You don't need to bullshit people.
absolutely, I 100% align with that. And I think it is come down a lot to security, right? To be able to say, I don't know, to be able to set a boundary that says, we're going to go personal here. I really care about you. And right now, the thing you're asking for, I can't or I don't want to do, right? That is uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable and then sit there and let the person respond and know that that might change the relationship or whatever, right? Like, it's a little easier sometimes for those examples in personal, but it's the same thing. If you have an employee that comes to you and they want something and it's not in alignment with the business, like, you have to think through what's the bigger picture best interest and come up with a solution and then talk them through it. And they may or may not see it from your perspective, but you just have to be making the best decisions that you can and be so upfront and so honest.
Yep. It's amazing. It's how hard it is for some people to do that sometimes, and just have to be confident. Just so much easier too. And I always look at it and say, it's like, just do that. And you'll quickly get to the answer you're maybe avoiding or don't want to get to. And it's just like, it's on the table now. Here's the situation. Now we can either decide or live with that or not, and move forward on a more, on a path that's better for everybody.
And you know what? I think what you just said, it sparked something for me. Now we can move forward. And it's like, when you don't have either the self-awareness, or you maybe do, but you prefer to put out a different version, it almost stops you from being able to move forward, right? Because if you don't put things on the table, then it's like these unforeseen stumbling blocks that just keep stalling things. And you're like, well, why isn't this working? Like, probably because some conversation hasn't happened. And whether it's a conversation you're actively avoiding because or it's one that you are just not aware of because you haven't sat and opened up your brain and senses to what's actually happening because you're just rushing, right? Like, entrepreneurs, we love a problem. If we don't have one, we'll create one. But we also tend to be like, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And I think there's this beauty to entrepreneurship, and then there's the next level of entrepreneurship is like finding that fulcrum of like presence and learning to keep moving forward.
Yep.
So speaking of moving forward, where did your kind of journey take you? Because now you've got quite an interesting mix. You've got branditize, celebritize. Those are pretty online and international. You have, I think, hypergrowth, which is much more like San Diego local. How do the businesses that you have now, how did they come to be? How do they all kind of work together?
Yeah, I mean we'll take a long timeline and try to compress it. So the agency, to kind of go back to that story, Brian Tracy, who we were just solely dedicated to many years, all of a sudden we had many people come to us and say, "Hey, what you do for Brian, what you do for me." And eventually we're like, this is interesting. Maybe we need to do that as a business. And then we went from one to many. And ultimately, we help thought leaders, helping experts build their empires. And to me, it's you look back and say, most thought leaders are thought leaders and they're the creative type. They don't have, they shouldn't be running the business. They don't have necessarily the business acumen. And it's funny, even those that teach leadership skills doesn't necessarily make them a proper leader to manage many employees and run a business. They understand the fundamentals, but there's actually the practicing of doing that is a different world. Use the skill set. And I always had kind of a hybrid visionary / COO skill set where I was more like the organized entrepreneur with a high follow through and a lot of other things, which we could talk about, which I found in hindsight is actually more on the rare side. But it's led me to be able to do certain things with people. And then on the so that was Branditize, which became an agency working with thought leaders, and that business scaled from we capped out at about 6.5 million a year. Could never get to the 10 to 12 million range, is what I found. For as I could teach what I learned is that in the agency life, until you get to like 10 figures or more, it's hard to get a good exit on a roll up. And so we just peaked at about 6, and then we sort of fell back down as we went up and down in the agency life. Ultimately, been doing that and still doing that actively for that's been 25 years, about 25 years all in with Brian, and then about 11, 12 years as an agency working with many clients. So we've made it through that and the ups and downs. Another fun stat there is you learn, the vanity metric of, how many employees you have. And yay, we had 45 employees or 50 employees. My first company, 400 employees. But it's like I was losing money at 400 employees. At 45 employees, I'm making almost the same profit. Profits never change much between having 5 employees to 50 employees because you tend to, reinvest a lot of that back into the business, and you just have bigger problems, bigger issues, bigger pay because you're always chasing that. If we just get to this point, we're going to really skyrocket up, and revenues and profits are really going to explode when we get here as you continue to reinvest and chase. And oftentimes it's not that simple, especially in the agency life. So, by the way, side note, hypergrowth strategies you mentioned, that's just a personal corporation. So there's no real business in there. That's just me as a consultant. And that's playing the, let's just say it's the tax, the way you sort of in the US, how you want to do your taxes, where you sort of, I don't want to pay Eric Berman as an employee. I'd rather pay my corporation, and then I run everything through my business. But I know that can be confusing, but actually that is a teach in that if people aren't incorporating themselves as individuals, they should be. Or I would say go meet your tax accountant and get that advice. But yeah, that's something I've been doing for a long time to save a lot of money in taxes, legitimately. So Branditize, and just recently, my pivot of that. So my next sort of mental pivot was grind in the world of agency life. And a lot of people that run agencies, and this is a reflection, they tend to run agencies based off the skill set they had. Like, hey, I'm an paid media guru, so therefore I'm going to build a paid media agency. I'm an SEO guru and build. I was never necessarily the marketing expert at one particular thing. Like, hey, I'm the brilliant at CRO. I was a good business builder. I was good at building the company and doing all the things. And I was a very good marketing generalist in hindsight and what I've been told. And there's certain skills that I'm better than others, like user experience and all that. But as far as like getting under the hood, I was never that. So it wasn't like this excitement to have an agency. And it's another thing learning when you reflect back on the business you're running is, does it really get you excited? Or, where was I just chasing it to try to get to an exit into big money? Was I really passionate about that thing I was doing every day? And after year and years, I'm looking back, I'm like, I'm not really that passionate in running an agency. What's the point of this? I was excited to get Brian Tracy's message and Jack Canfield's message out to the world because we are impacting lives. So that's what got me through it, is to know that if I'm helping these thought leaders do big things, I'm affecting people around the globe. Cool. That's a win, makes me feel good. But ultimately, there's a lot of work and effort. And the results for me on what I'm getting back for that was not as high as I'd like. And the other lesson that I talk about a lot is, what sandbox are you playing in? And I never forget a quote that I got from those that know the amazing Roland Frazier. We talked and had lunch one day. He goes, Eric, you have such a great skill set in the things you've done. And I was so honored. He said that. He goes, you've been climbing the wrong ladder. Meaning all this energy and skills I'm playing, I call it the sandbox, the ladder. I'm playing in this world that has a limited upside. And I look at others that have made massive success and have made millions of dollars. And I'm not saying that's not the only measurement of success. Yes, I am more of an achievement seeker, so I will admit that. It's where are you playing this effort? And one of the things I look back in life and regret is saying I went down this path, and once I went down, I was building and building and building and never stopping and saying, well, wait a second. I wish, because I always thought I was closer to that end game than I liked a bit. And eventually it was like, I'm still on this treadmill here and I'm have a nice pass, I'm not sitting around, poor by any means, but I'm certainly not for the energy and effort and the skill set achieving at least a financial success I feel like I could have when I looked around and saw what others have done. And I looked in it and I studied and I said, well, they're just playing in a different sandbox. They're on a different ladder than I am. So that's one of the biggest life lessons I've had for myself that I look back and say, and you didn't ask the question what I regretted, but if you had asked that, that's probably one of the biggest things I would have said is where I've been putting my energy. And I haven't gotten your question. I'll get there in a minute and I'll pause a second, but that's what ultimately has led me now to these next ventures in my life and why I'm going to that path now.
I would love to just, maybe it's more of a highlight. We maybe don't have to dig into it, but what you said about agency and valuation and exit. So one of our companies with my former business partner was an agency. And I always tell people, like, think about where you're going, because for an exit, an agency, to your point, is basically a service-based
Yeah.
business, is
Yeah.
extremely hard to value and often very hard to get a strong valuation for an exit. So it's typically more of an acqui-hire. It, can give you a great continuous role that, removes some of your responsibility and allows you to scale. And there's all kinds of good things, and we did it. But it's, if you're, depending what your goals are. And so, as I said, maybe we don't need to dig further in, but I wanted to highlight that because I do think understanding business models, especially if people are coming in as an expert in something and then they kind of grow. And this is a lot of my first early clients in my first few years were people who were good enough at something that they then had other people come in to help them, and they were kind of wearing all the hats. I call that kind of like, now you're the founder, but you're also like the manager wearing all the hats, spinning all the plates, and like ascending to a true leader that like starts to remove those hats is one, very hard. And two, the scalability, the transferability, the ability to move on to something else in that type of business versus a more SaaS or other product type business is very different.
It is. It's almost like I was just thinking, I almost call it the agency trap. I mean, on one hand, the policy, it's not all negative for anybody listening. It's not like it's a horrible thing to do, but I think you have to realize what you're walking into. On one hand, the positives is it's very low entry point. You're not investing all this capital to go start it. You can make income for yourself. So those are all the positives. Like, it's a great way to get going. But I think you just nailed, and I want to reiterate what you said, the two traps could be, is one is you might be limited in how far you can grow just based on your own skill set, not being able to get out of the way and know how to run a company. Back to the example I said, fortunately for me, I was more of a business builder, so that helped in these instances. But I wasn't necessarily great at that one thing. A lot of people are great at that one skill set, but then when it comes to adding the team and growing and being a leader, they might fail at that perspective. For me, it was, again, it was like, okay, great, I'm making some money and I'm doing okay. And it was easy to get started in that. But what the hell am I doing looking back after 15 years? Like, okay, I'm still just in this hamster cage. And a lot of people wouldn't be complaining where I'm at. For me, I feel like there was more. And that's why I said I need to get to the next step.
Well, and that's the other thing I picked up on. You said, you're really the business builder. And you also said you're kind of a visionary, but a COO organization level with a lot of follow-up. I love that description. And I think that's actually what you and I have in common. So we used to joke because I went in and we had all of the startups that I was part of it's some kind of tech. And people would be like, oh, Alex, I didn't realize you were in tech, right? I had come out of strategy consulting and M&A in energy and natural resources, right? And before that in, medicine and marketing. And so I would say to people, I'm not. My job is everything but the tech. I'm actually not
Right.
allowed too close to the tech. It doesn't
Yeah,
always
yeah.
respond well to me. My fundamental job is to mature the organization, to make it grow scalable and to scale it and to do all the other things. Now, what I would love to hear from you is more on that just as an archetype, because I think it's rare and interesting. And I score off the, I score well on visionary, but off the charts on integrator, if we kind of want to talk from that model. And I suspect you do too. But it also, I had to be, and it was interesting because in consulting, I found it quite exhausting to always be put out as an expert, but doing something for the first time. But that skill, I used to joke that I was like, it's like skating. Like you're just constantly stabilizing and trying to look held together. But it really did translate. I had to pick up skills. And so I was a math girly. So talking to developers, once you understand that code is logic, you're like, okay, I can figure this out enough without learning. I mean, we were doing digital reality tech in some of our companies, cutting edge technology. I don't have to become a developer. I don't have to speak every code, but I have to be able to have a conversation about the logic and the QA and the other things enough until we have other people that thread in below me to take that over, right?
Yep.
And so I found like that journey was fascinating, and I think that ability to learn and structure your mind around things really quickly, to the point where my business partner would sometimes be feeding information by text or like beside me on a call on mute, and then I would like put it out to the
Oh, nice.
meeting.
Nice.
How has that archetype worked for you? Like what is it like to be that person? What does that add value in your business partnerships, and what does it drive you to want to do? I think that's what you're doing now, probably. Like how are you applying that now?
I think it's the knowledge of having well, what's interesting is even though I could be a good integrator, I've also tried to push myself out of that role and more into stay visionary, but understand all the fundamentals that's needed. So it's actually allowed me to say, what are all the pieces that are needed? Because I don't want to go down that path. Because as soon as I get stuck, I call it, the in the weed sandbox. Like as soon as I start putting my feet in there, now I'm going to get sucked into the weeds of the business. And yes, I need to do that in some instances. So I can't say I'm out of the sand, out of the quicksand, because I'm in it and some of the things I'm doing. I think having the skill set to understand what it takes allows me not just say, hey, here's the vision, but I know that there's a team that needs to do these things, and I got to put the right people in place to get those mechanisms going, is the way I've been able to do that. So I think that's allowed me to kind of see big picture, not only visionary, but of the company, to say, is it set up correctly to be able to do all those things? And I think doing reflections recently, it's a skill that the other skill I think lends more to what I would talk about now, that I feel fortunate to have, is really the high follow through skill for the entrepreneurial side, and that is also rare. I mean, I know you're good with that too, but after talking to many people, that's like I look back now and say, like, the one thing, like, what would you teach to your kids, kind of thing, and all that. I'm like, high follow through, like, just have, yes, you can have the vision and but if you and everything else, but if you can't stay on top of people or have a high follow through and things fall through the cracks, it is the most frustrating thing. But then I also looked at that and said, recently I stopped getting frustrated, and I just accepted most people have crappy follow through at a leadership level. And then you turn around and say, well, that is a superpower, because if you can have that, guess what I've discovered? People want to do business with the people that are high follow through. People love, they call people like high follow through, like me and you and others, is they're reliable. Well, why are they reliable? Because they know that no matter what somebody sends you, you're going to stay on top of it and you're going to follow through. That's a good trait to know that people, and then, like, okay, what does that mean? Well, it means people always say, you got to hire this guy, you got to meet with this guy, because they know they're going to come through for you. So I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I wanted to share that as you talked about the visionary, such operators. Like, yes, there's the integrator side, but it's just having that insanely high follow through skill set, which has allowed me to push things forward where many might have like fallen apart, and just staying on top of every possible thing that's going on my.
I love that clarification, because actually I think, to your point, it's a characteristic that can fit into different archetypes. Again, I'm just going to like flog a dead horse here. It's consistency. right? It's being a person of your word to yourself and to others. That's a big distinction because, like, a lot of us maybe are good at one but not the other. And that applies to whether you meet your health goals, whether you build good personal relationships, right? Like that high follow through is really how you become a successful human, let alone business person and leader, I think.
It is, and it's like it's absolutely fascinating to me at how few people have a good like they think they are, but they're just not. Like you like I mean to a point where like I have to I don't I never like get rid of a task that somebody I have somebody else do until I've worked with them long enough that I know if I send it to them, I can take it off my list. Like it just becomes I just don't trust people that ever and because it goes back to I am responsible. I look at it and say, well, what could I, like, it didn't happen. So I can get mad at the person for them not responding or them dropping the ball. Or I could say, well, shit, what could you have done, Eric? And I say, well, I could have stayed on top of them and asked them for like what, I could have not assumed that they're responsible enough to get the thing done, or they're late, or maybe their priorities shifted and it fell through. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the end product being done. So I got to stay on top of it. Now, it's obviously burdensome. It takes a lot of work, but I think it's helped on that end. Or you get a good. Or what I teach people is if you suck at it, which most people aren't great at, is number one is recognize you're not good at it. Number two is go find somebody to work with you, EA or others, that's sitting there and being a mega follow through for you. If you got to at least do that one thing.
I think it's also just a key leadership trait, right? Like I always say, it's always your fault as a leader. And it may be your fault that you didn't fire the person and they're still in
Yep.
the company. Like that might
Yep.
be why it's your fault, or you hired the wrong person. But there's a lot of in between that happens there. And if you can just sit with, it's always my fault and not let that then become a pity party, right? Like, and waste a bunch of energy there. It's like, it's always my fault. So what could I have done? Let me try that next time. Did that work? Now that's the new, baseline. And I
That's right.
think that perspective, when you were talking earlier, I thought of internal locus of control. I'm just a psychology
Mhm.
nerd. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
think everyone, almost every single person, I would say every single person, but I'm like rolling through the Rolodex that has been on this show, that has built incredible companies, teams, their version of success has had internal locus of control,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. No, it's brilliant. I like the way you said that. So I'll continue because I paused, but I'll go down to the other question. I still owe you an answer. So branditize, having saw the treadmill I'm on, the two pivots I found, one is, and not in any particular order, one is celebritize, which is really just me. The problem I'm trying to solve here is what I call the asset equity problem. Um, Branditize, and again, the learn there is that, and it's obvious, what is the real value I'm creating? It's the enterprise value of an agency, which is tough to sell, as you and I talked about earlier. It's doable, but it's like you may not get the multiple. And a lot of it's because you don't own an asset. I'm sitting here having clients and they can come and go as they please. And yes, maybe you have 12-month contracts with some or not, but there's still a life, there's end life, and you don't control the situation. So how do I create a real asset? So what I been able to start to test the model of, and so far it's off to a pretty good start, is taking the concept of an expert, but looking at the influencer slash minor celebrity, whatever you want to call them. And I've noticed there's a lot of influencer celebrities, the same concept that I approached going back to my days of Brian Tracy. Before there was the influencer world you see now, the gurus that you listen to on your cassette tapes in the car were the influencers back in the day. So now it's just a new type of influencer. And the reality is there are experts out there that have a mega followings that are getting paid millions of dollars a year for endorsing other people's stuff. So I look to them and say, well, wait a second, you have the same problem I've had for years. You don't have a real business there. You're just out there promoting other people's stuff, making millions, but that's going to be gone like, 2 years, 3 years, that might be gone. And what do you have left to show other than whatever money you made in the account? You probably might spend most of it because you think this is going to go on for years, which is another mistake people do is, oh, I'm going to make this for years. This is my new life. I'm going to go buy some things because I've made $2 million this year being an endorser and I'm going to be an endorser forever. Not the case. So prepare accordingly. So, my approach is to say, well, look, I already have the skill set and knowledge to take an expert and build a business behind them. Let me do that with you, Mr. or Mrs. Influencer Celebrity, because you don't have a real business yet. But what you bring to the table is all these followers you have. And what that does for me is saves me money having to go spend money on other normal, traditional paid media and other media. So I've been testing this model out, and so far it's going really well with a couple of different case studies of one in the golf space, one in the dermatology space. I've taken these influencers and building out companies. So my future idea to be continued. You can check back for a future episode you and I do to see how it's going. But yeah, is to build out build out businesses. And I guess that let me clarify the point there. The difference between this model is, let's say you were an influencer, Alex. I'd say, hey, we're going to build a company together, but you're not hiring me as an agency. I'm going to come in and we're going to start a new co together. We're going to share we're going to build it and structure it so that we're now tied together. You have X percent, I have Y percent. Maybe I kick in some capital, we go raise money, or maybe we don't need to capitalize it depending what we're building. But now we're truly business partners. And there's all certain, I mean, you and I could talk for an hour about what to look out for in building that kind of relationship. But the point is, we're now less of a client relationship and more of a partner relationship. Completely changes the dynamic. All of a sudden you have an issue or I have an issue, we're having a conversation. It's not like, hey, by the way, my cousin's friend's brother looked at my website and think they could do a better job. So see you later. I'm giving you my 30-day notice. You don't get any of those kind of calls. And I think for the agency owners listening to this, they're probably laughing and saying, shit, yep, I know how that goes. So anyway, long answer to that story on the celebritized side, and then I can get into Speakeasy in a second.
Yeah, I really want to talk about Speakeasy. I wanted to touch on one thing you said just before we do that. You were talking about kind of success and the definition of success and where the regrets you've had and where you're looking to like make changes. And I talk about this so much in my work, but also on this podcast, because I just think you can't talk about a journey and building without talking about what's the ultimate goal, right? And we are social animals. We're programmed to society, right? And yet we all have distinct purpose and fulfillment that we may or may not, to the previous conversation about self-awareness, fully understand. And so, I talk about wealthy leadership. It's just the brand I like to put on your version of success, right? And so for my clients, that's okay, what is the business? Why are we doing it? Does your role look like? But what makes you the best version of you, and what's important to you? And can your calendar more or less reflect your priorities, right? And do you really know what those are? And I do kind of think you can treat your life the way you treat a business in terms of having priorities and being very intentional about trade-offs. So I always want to know, what is your version of success? What is success on your terms, and how has that evolved over your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it definitely has evolved because, first, I would say there's pre-family and post-family. Like pre-family, it's just like success is go, 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 build wealth. For me, like I'm more achievement seeker. Again, if you look at the values wheel, I'm more of achievement. Like success is defined by, yes, it's like am I able to ultimately retire, not have to work again, not have the ability, not have to think about it. When I stopped working, no, I'd go advise and do other cool things and still build stuff, but not have to work to be able to survive and continue the lifestyle, which isn't like super crazy, like, the lifestyle, but at least to not have to worry about things. That was always sort of like getting to that point for me, having made it, okay, I don't have to stress about it. It's definitely changed in the struggle being, new dad of a 4 and a 2-year-old is, it's a different kind of now animal. It's, success is like, how do I do that and get more time and be intentional with the family and the kids and all that, that's how do I keep them happy and be a great dad and husband and all these things, while juggling. And again, like I said, that's a different layer of growth myself has to go through to figure out how to balance that. So I think success to me today is, yes, and still achieving that, but doing it in a way that's not going to sacrifice the happiness of my family and the ability for me to connect with them. And if I have to give up one or the other, it's going to be the monetary goal. And, obviously I'm going to be there more with the family and do whatever it takes. Obviously that's where you say, hey, well, maybe we don't need to live in San Diego and pay these crazy taxes. Maybe we come live by you, Alex, and be out in Playa de Carmen and live a different lifestyle, kind of thing. So.
Well, we are looking for more members for our Speakeasy chapter, so we'd love to have you. All right, talk to me. Talk to me about Speakeasy, because that's the wonderful way that we connected. You have got this phenomenal community. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's one of those again. Sometimes the big ideas are sitting right in front of you. Um, this got formed because when I started with Brian Tracy, and a couple other big gurus and thought leaders, a guy named John Assaraf, for those that might know John Assaraf, and Mike Koenigs, and a couple other big names, said, "Hey, Eric, let's get together a mastermind. Let's share what's working in business, and let's not it's always yes to each other. Let's not nothing hidden. Let's just go out there and help lift each other up." Kind of mentality, which I always one thing that's cool about the industry you and I play in, as well as other industries, is like there's not this sense of competition, like, oh, you can't share the trade secret. It's like some of the only industries it's like this co-opetition where we're all kind of working together to lift each other up, because there's so much. We're all about doing good in this world with the things we're building. So it was natural and easy to do that. That dinner meeting of 5 of us turned into like 10. Next thing you know, it was 20, and then no more restaurants, just houses and offices, so we wouldn't get interrupted. And then people would bring guests, and guests would show up and say, "Damn, that was the best dinner group. My God, I can't believe how smart everybody is now giving and like people sharing what's working and this, that, and the other thing." That was powerful. So hey, if you ever want to do this in my city, let me know. Heard that about 10, 15 times. But I would say I wasn't really open to it, and I don't think I was ready for it yet, until, going back to our conversation, me having the realization and finally accepting that my future path isn't going to be running an agency my whole life. So I had to have the frustration big enough to say, all right, I need to be mentally open, which is another lesson there, is saying, when are you mentally ready and open for new opportunities to start really hitting you? It's not like this opportunity wasn't sitting in front of my face the entire time. I wasn't ready to hear the message. So I finally was more ready to hear the message. And I sat there and said, well, wait a second. And being the quick start that I am, I said, all right, let me quickly run some numbers on a napkin, and just say, all right, well, this many chapters, this many cities, can I copy it, and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's test it out. And so we ran 2 cities, did some tests, went really well. And then we said, all right, this is great. Let's now build out a real company and see if we could start doing the things to do that. So ultimately what we built out is this concept of aggregating around 30 super high level entrepreneurs that have a big heart, open-minded, open to share, that are all out there. I'd say they're the hustle entrepreneurs. They're not startups. They're in their weeds. They're like you and I. They're out there trying to build businesses together. They're not so huge that they've delegated everything off. They don't care anymore. They've already made it. They're not startup where they want to learn from everybody, but they're there in the grind doing big things. Let's all share together what we're doing together. Let's be there for each other, because we could grow so much faster. And I didn't understand the concept it's lonely as an entrepreneur until I really started thinking about it through this program and I'm always like, I'm not lonely. I'm this extroverted guy. I have lots of friends. And I took it the wrong way. I was like literally saying that. I'm like, no. It's actually lonely, because it truly is these things we go through. You can't talk to your employees all the time. You don't have your significant other, if you have one. They don't quite understand the depth of the problems you're dealing with oftentimes, unless they happen to be really in the business with you. So it's having a group that quickly gets it and has really good experience shares of what they're doing. And they're very aligned tactically to the world we're playing in. There's other groups that I've been in that are like entrepreneurs, and I have a restaurant owner or somebody that runs a biodiesel company. That's a different type of business, an entrepreneur, which is cool. And I guess one of the moral of the stories here is, yes, join mastermind groups, get involved in groups, get around peers. There's a lot of them out there. Find the one that works best for you, do the interviews and figure it out. This one I built on knowing how other ones work and saying there's certain things I love about these groups and there's certain things I think we could do better. And then ultimately, as you know, the biggest thread about our group is the in-person meetings in your city is the magic. Having that as the core of the business, to say, all right, we are coming together. And it's getting more and more profound. Even though we did this 15 years ago, we are in this crazy AI world where we don't even know what's real anymore. And we need community now more than ever. So having an intentional opportunity to connect with people that are vibing and are at your level and understand the things you go through is powerful. And so that's what we're just trying to build. Trying to build that in each city, and then we connect people across all the chapters. So there's that really good meeting with a great structure locally, and then the ability to connect globally like you and I are doing today. And we wouldn't have met each other if it wasn't for this. And now we're sharing and collaborating and all that kind of stuff, even though we're not in the same city. So creating systems and tools to be able to ensure those things are happening is what we're building out.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to highlight the last thing you said, even if there's so many good things, but you and I met through Speakeasy. We're both connectors. Like, I've known you not very long, but like, I know you're a connector. I write multiple connection emails a week. I've now that I know you realize how many people we know in common, but all of us run at such a pace that it's wild to me now that I'm like, oh, we haven't connected before, even though as people who are connectors. Now imagine if you're maybe not quite as a connector and you are running at a million miles an hour. Like there is something about, to your point, do the interviews, figure out which group, both in like how they approach it and who the member archetypes are. But there is something about that dedicated time that is so important and really creates a different conversation, to your point of how open people are. Like everyone is there with the same intention of being together and sharing, and it's not like, oh, we're here for a quick coffee catch up, or we're in a sales conversation but then something else comes out of it, or which are all great and a lot of value can come from those. But curating an ambiance, and I've run a few masterminds, events, like creating and curating the intention and the ambiance, and like I kind of think it's the same as culture, if you were to think of a
Yep.
team, is
Yep.
so important and is so powerful when it's done well. And I think, getting to know Speakeasy and getting to see more people from different chapters and seeing how you guys have grown, like it's clear to me that that is one of your superpowers.
Yeah, no, thank you. It is, looking back on life, it's so funny to me, and it all full circle is having built community and bringing people in, and a lot of it goes through the follow through skill set that I have, and I look back and say, well, what am I talking about? I look back at my life and I say, okay, if I go all the way back to high school, I was the guy that had friends in every group. I had friends in the football team. I had friends in the I was in the nerdy classes, if you will, the accelerated classes. So I had those friends. I had all the groups. Then I went to college, and it was like, why you joined a fraternity? I'm like, no, I just made friends with people in every fraternity. Why would I do that? I go, I can go to every party, like versus just one. I'm like, so I was like the guy that built all these different groups, and then I went to the next job, and then it's like next thing you know, when we built this mastermind, even and then San Diego started, I sort of became the default leader of organizing and building the community because of the follow through, the ability to understand, and I finally understood when you're a community builder the emotional intelligence, what that truly means, and the ability to really see all the people involved and understanding what their needs are and being able to quickly adapt and serve everybody as best as you can, at least them feeling like you're trying to serve them. Ultimately, is what's important about building community. Oh, I forgot, I had another business I started called the Convivium. You'd like this one. It was I built a community back in when I was like 30s of bringing together business owners that wanted to work hard and play hard in San Diego. And we had a whole tribe of people we just brought together. And next thing you know, it was like, okay, we're doing a big events, we're doing this. And it was based off of the word convivial, which was like, most people, I'm like, that's a word I learned. I'm so proud of myself because I had a crappy, I still have a crappy vocabulary. I guess the fond of being festive and good company and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
anyway, that
it's
was
a very multilingual word as well. Convivial, like it works in like a lot of languages. So I
I
love
like
that.
that. So that
Um,
was anyway. I just thought of that as I was talking, but yeah. But I think it's. Um, so I'm really feeling excited about all the things we talked about. If nothing else, I think this is the one for me because it really goes into what I've discovered, and it's taken so long for me to discover this about myself of what my true strengths are compared to others in the same world, and it's that building the community and doing the things we're doing.
I love that. And I love the frame you put on it too of like the follow through and the this. I've never really thought back to high school. I'm not as much of an extrovert and I definitely wasn't, but I had friends in every group and I actually saw it as like, oh, I don't fit into any group. Like I was a little bit of an outcast, but I had
Yeah.
these strong connections. I would get, be at all the things and I was super nerdy, but sports was like my passion. So I think something about what you said like really struck me where I was like, oh, I've never thought about that arc, but I've always been someone who can organize. Like if I say I'm going to do something, I'll organize it, I'll make it happen. And I've always been somebody where, yeah, I connect with very different people. And then whatever that like how to curate and bring that together is something that has always been very enjoyable. So I think that's such an interesting
Yep.
to come
Yeah.
to. I still think, even, you're just figuring this out. Myself, I've had moments where people have had to be like, what do you mean you're not a people person, you're not a leader, you're a math nerd? Like, no, we're pushing you onto partner track because our teams will
Yeah.
follow you to the end of the earth and clients won't sign. And I'm like, huh? Like, it was like I was like 30 at the time. You would think you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
yourself. But I think it's so fun to have these reflections. It's one of the things I love
Totally.
about these conversations.
Totally. And I think the lesson there is we don't do it enough. I regret now to really look back and understand it well enough. You tend to think, I think we tend to think what is easy for us, is natural, is easy for others. And
There's a
and
really good book about that. It's based on the DISC model, which is a much nicer DISC model, but the book is called Surrounded by Idiots. But
okay.
it talks about the DISC model as these four different personality types who see the world and operate so differently. And so if you do not understand that the way you see the world, the way you process, isn't the way someone else does, it can feel extremely frustrating. Or in the case that you're talking about, which I say this all the time, like, we assume everyone knows what we know. We assume that the things we know and are good at are baseline and easy. We don't value our skills and our knowledge and our expertise at
Hmm.
a level because they feel just part of daily life.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
yeah, I bet that that is a huge part of what you help your clients with, is helping them call that out and then communicate that out to the people that they
It,
can
it,
help.
it is a big thing because a lot of the experts don't realize, how good they are at certain things. It's like, no, this is what we got to lean into.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of time. You've been so generous with your insights, your time, and I feel like we could do 5 more episodes. But if people do want to find you either to work with Branditize or Celebritize or collab with you or get involved with Speakeasy, we'll put it in the show notes, but what's the best way?
Yeah, I think just probably find me on LinkedIn, slash Eric Berman, EricBerman. Um, or you could just look up Branditize, Speakeasy Mastermind. You'll find those, but in the show notes. Yeah, that'd be great.
Amazing. I have 5 rapid fire questions for you. One word, one sentence. You can absolutely pass. Are
All
you
right.
ready?
Yep.
Brilliant. What's one decision that changed everything for you as a leader?
I think probably taking that first. And I wasn't a leader yet, but I think it was going and taking the risk to do that first. For every all of the first job I took. I wouldn't call it job, the first business I decided to build, and going in there and just saying, let me know let's go. What do I need to do? And just starting to go.
Amazing. What does strategy feel like when you're doing it well?
When you're doing it well, I feel like the outputs, the results you're getting is sort of what was in your head, vision number one. And I think number two is I think you've been able to efficiently delegate all the tasks to the right people on the team. And the outputs you're getting, not only from you, really just from all the way from top to bottom, is coming together. It almost inevitably won't come together initially while you thought about it, but the pivots are just smooth enough that it's slowly getting to that end point. Not the straight line, but kind of going a little like this, and you're getting there, and everybody's just kind of running like an orchestra.
Excellent. Is there a book, podcast, or person that cracked something open for you?
Brian Tracy.
Love it. What's something you've said never again to in your business?
I repeat that.
What's something you've said never again to in your business?
But never again, like meaning I would never do it again in business. Oh, I think that's an easy one. I think it's going with the gut on the PITAs clients. So PITA, for those that don't know in the agency world, PITA, pain in the ass people. I have a little energy test that if you're prospecting, I always say, like, even if you're already feeling this in the prospecting phase, working with people, then you got to say no, whether it's clients or people. It's, do you get lit up when their phone rings or a text from them, or do you say, oh my god, I don't even want to look at it, and you're like immediately you just go into like stress mode before you see it? That's your sign that never again do you want to work with this person. You got to get out as soon as possible.
I love that. Great stress test. If you had a free weekend, zero obligations, how would you spend it?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what that feels like. No, I think right now it would just be with family, just actually putting the computer and the phone away, like, which is really hard for me, like to not engage, not check in on anything. And I think just enjoying quality time. And that's a newish thing with me having the little kids now and realizing how important that is and how good that feels to have that close engagement and connection.
I love it. Eric, thank you again for your generosity, your time, your shares. So excited to have you back and see what you are up to, next season. So excited for Speakeasy. Thank you for being with me on Builders.
Well, thank you so much for your time as well and asking all the amazing questions and how just awesome you are. And looking forward to our continued journey as well.
That's a wrap for this episode of Builders, where we get real about what it actually takes to grow companies that perform without grinding you into the ground. If today's convo sparks something for you, here's what to do next. Follow the show, drop a 5-star review, and share it with someone else who's building big. Don't let it be lonely at the top. If you're ready for more clarity, more leadership freedom, and less of a duct tape and go growth vibe, let's connect. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth. Walk away with a personalized fix-it list that gives you the clarity you've been craving on what to shift now to regain traction and build momentum. For more tools, insights, and my no-fluff takes on leadership and scaling strategically, join the Builders Club, also linked in the show notes. You can also head over to leaderswhobuild.com, where you'll find all the links to peep my creds, see client wins, or just confirm that yes, I went to the gym today. Until next time, keep leading boldly, building smart, and living success on your terms.